The day my badge stopped working, I was holding 2 cups of coffee. One for me, one for the client I was about to walk into a meeting with. I just stood there in the lobby, pressing that little card against the reader over and over, like maybe the door would change its mind. It didn't. That was the moment I knew for certain that Coastal Bloom Interiors had already let me go, before anyone had the nerve to actually say it to my face. My name is Jordan Calloway, and until that Thursday morning, I had spent 6 years building the most loyal client roster in our firm's entire history. Not the most glamorous job title, Senior Client Relations Director. Doesn't exactly make people lean in at dinner parties, but here's what that title actually meant. I was the reason our clients stayed. The reason they came back, the reason they referred their friends, their neighbors, their daughters who just bought their first homes in Charleston and Austin and Scottsdale. I didn't just manage accounts. I knew these people. I knew that Margaret Chen, who owned 4 vacation properties up and down the Carolina coast, only trusted white oak floors because she'd grown up running barefoot on them at her grandmother's house. I knew that the Delaney family needed every single design choice run by their youngest daughter first because she had the sharpest eye of anyone in that household, and if she didn't love it, nobody did. I knew that Robert Vasquez, who had commissioned 3 full home renovations through us, always got nervous right before the reveal, and that if you just sat with him quietly and let him talk about his late wife, he'd settle and he'd trust you completely. That kind of knowledge doesn't live in a CRM system. It lives in the years, in the phone calls at 10 at night, in the handwritten birthday cards, and the memory of who takes their coffee black and who cries at the sight of a finished nursery. But our new VP of operations, a guy named Preston, who'd transferred in from a corporate hotel group in Dallas, he didn't see any of that. What Preston saw was that I didn't close fast enough, that my process was inefficient, that I spent too much time, quote unquote, holding hands. He brought in a consultant named Tiffany, early 30s, beautiful portfolio, LinkedIn profile with more buzzwords than a marketing conference. She shadowed me for 6 weeks. I thought she was there to learn the department. I was wrong about that. Preston called me into the conference room on a Tuesday. HR was there. You always know when HR is already seated that it's over. They used words like restructuring and evolving client strategy and role elimination. They gave me a severance packet and a compliment that felt like a consolation prize. Tremendous asset to the firm, Preston said. Couldn't even look up from his notepad when he said it. I took my box. I took the little succulent I'd kept on my windowsill for 4 years, and I walked out the same front door where that badge reader had given me the very first warning 2 hours earlier. The drive home felt surreal, like the sky was the wrong color. I'd given that firm 6 years of early mornings and late evenings and weekends spent on site because a client was anxious and needed a hand to hold, apparently. I thought they knew what they had in me. They didn't, not yet anyway. The first 3 weeks, I won't lie to you, I was a mess. I reorganized my whole apartment twice. I baked things I'd never baked before: banana bread, sourdough, a focaccia that looked beautiful and tasted like regret. My sister flew down from Cincinnati and sat on my couch and told me I was better off. I believed her about 40% of the time. Then around day 26, my phone started to hum. The first call was from Margaret Chen. She didn't know I'd left, nobody had told her, and she'd called the main line asking for me specifically and been told I was no longer with the company. She was furious. Not sad, furious. She called my personal cell within an hour. "Jordan," she said, "I don't know what happened over there, but I want you to know I'm not working with anyone else." I told her I appreciated that. I told her I was figuring out my next step. She said, "Well, figure faster, honey." The second call came from the Delaneys. Their youngest daughter had already emailed the firm to say the new contact, Tiffany, had presented a design direction that was completely wrong for the space, and that she wanted me back or she wanted out. The third call was from Robert Vasquez, who had a renovation scheduled to begin in 6 weeks and had already met with Tiffany once and described it to me as, and I'm quoting directly here, like talking to a very attractive brochure. I sat with all of this. I let myself feel it. Not the smugness, I'm past that now, but the grief. The grief that it had to fall apart before anyone could see clearly. The grief that I'd spent so long making myself essential that I'd somehow made myself invisible at the same time. Preston called me on day 31. I let it go to voicemail. He called again the next morning. And then the firm's founder, a woman named Catherine Marsh, who had started Coastal Bloom 20 years ago out of a tiny studio apartment in Savannah, she called me herself. Catherine had always been fair to me. She'd been the one who gave me my first real title, my first real raise. So when I say her name on my screen, I picked up. She didn't sugarcoat it. That's not who Catherine is. She told me the transition had been rougher than anyone anticipated, that 3 of our top-tier clients had made formal complaints, that Margaret Chen had already forwarded a letter threatening to pull her entire portfolio. She said, "Jordan, I owe you an apology first and an offer second. I need to know which one you want to hear." I told her I'd hear both. The apology was real. I believed it. The offer was full creative control over client relations, a new title, a salary that finally reflected what I'd actually been worth for years, and a clause that no consultant would shadow my department without my explicit sign-off, ever again. I didn't say yes right away. I let myself sit with it for a full day, which was genuinely one of the harder things I've done. Because every instinct I had was screaming, "Go back, fix it, your people need you." But I needed to make the decision from a grounded place, not a reactive one. I said yes on my own terms, and I meant every one of them. I went back on a Monday morning, badge worked. Coffee was waiting. Catherine had already sent a firm-wide email introducing my new role. Preston's office, the one that used to be mine before the restructuring, was empty by the time I arrived. The first call I made was to Margaret. She laughed that big rolling laugh of hers and said, "I already picked out new floors. I've been waiting for you." Within 30 days, every flagged account had been stabilized. Within 60, the referral pipeline had more new projects queued than any quarter on record. The review that came in from a luxury living publication 2 months later described Coastal Bloom as, and I quote, "a firm that clearly understands something rare and increasingly hard to find. That people are the whole point." I printed that, framed it, hung it in my office, the real one, the one with the window and the little succulent that made it through everything. But the moment I think about most, it wasn't the comeback. It wasn't the new contract. It was a Saturday afternoon, 2 months after I returned, when I drove out to the Vasquez home to see the finished renovation for the first time. Robert was standing in the doorway when I pulled up. The light was hitting the house in that golden afternoon way that makes everything look like it was always meant to be exactly as it is. He walked me through every room slowly, quietly, the way he always does. And when we got to the living room, the one we'd designed around a photograph of his wife, he stopped. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he looked at me and said, "This is what she would have wanted. That's it. That's the whole thing, right there. That is what they could never replace. Not with a flashier title, not with a better Instagram presence, not with a consultant who knew all the right industry words but none of the right people. What they could never fire was the part of me that actually cared. I don't know what Tiffany is doing now. I genuinely wish her well because I think she was just as much a pawn in Preston's plan as I was a casualty of it. She didn't know what she didn't know. What I know now is this. I went back, yes. But I went back different. I went back knowing my value in a way I'd never fully let myself claim before. And I went back with every single client note, every relationship detail, every preference and quirk and personal detail documented, not so anyone could replicate what I do, but because I finally understood that building something real means you honor it enough to protect it, even from yourself. You build it with your whole heart, and then you make sure it can last. Have you ever been replaced and then called back?